what I felt on that time, like we can sort out that things quite nicely, but the way you come to me, it was like quite, I feel very angry, rude to me, and from that time I was quite threatening, so that's the way it was started, the stress and everything in my job. So
to me, it wasn't such a big problem. I just thought it was a human error, and if I didn't communicate that to you, then I apologise, because
we've just asked the groups to do a brief role play. We're asking some people to be somebody who's off work currently with stress. We're asking some of the group to be people who are HR, responsible for bringing people back into work. And we're asking some of the group to be line managers who are actually facing the day-to-day problems of carrying on the job while somebody's off work with stress. And they've come up with very interesting findings. Some of the ones that have come up is the fact that human resource need to be sensitive to the fact that people who will be off will be very anxious about these meetings. They're very formal and they can be very difficult. And other people have talked about the fact that employees have a responsibility to engage and to explain what their issues are. So even though they may be anxious, there's some responsibility on employees to kind of give information. And other people have talked about the fact that identifying the problems at an early stage is absolutely vital. What I want to do now for the remainder of the session is try to kind of get some feelings from people and ideas and thoughts about how that went.
How do you identify the difference between someone who is suffering from stress and someone who might be taking advantage?
How do you tell the difference? By using your human instincts, by knowing, by getting it wrong sometimes, by getting it right sometimes. The line manager is usually the first port of call when somebody has a problem at work. Senior managers are quite often distant and have no understanding of the day-to-day activities that go on. So for a line manager to be sensitive to those things going wrong and getting them at an early stage, identifying the problems at an early stage, I think is absolutely critical.
To the stage where it was just really, really uncomfortable, and I felt quite
We've recognised over the years as a company that the more support and understanding and listening you give to your team members, the more that they will give back to you. One example is a colleague of mine, Debbie, who went through a very tough time when her mother fell ill, and she found it very difficult to focus on her work because her main thought was her mother and her mother being able to pull through and being cared for.
Okay. Brilliant, thank you, Debbie. Thanks. Difficulties arising for me during that situation, I couldn't put anything in perspective. That's all I could think about, was losing my mum, my parent, and I really couldn't concentrate on anything else, not even other aspects of my family life, let alone work.
Debbie did come and talk to me, explained her situation, and immediately we made sure that she had the availability to go to hospital appointments with her mother, to be able to go and visit her when she needed to, and not only to give her the time off, but to make sure that her workload was covered. So other people would do her work, so it wasn't sat here stacking up, worrying her, stressing her.
It's really important to know that you've got people outside of your family who support you. And obviously, work becomes a really big part of your life. And to know that, these people are willing to just give you that time to sort yourself out is fantastic.
If we hadn't have done that at the beginning, I could have had a member of staff that perhaps was off with stress or anxiety for a number of weeks, and we were able to avoid that together. So Debbie benefited, because obviously if you're off with that type of mental illness, it can affect you in much more than just that short space of time. So we were able to avoid that, and of course it benefited the company because Debbie had the time off that she needed to have. But then when Debbie was back, when Debbie's mum was on the road to recovery, Debbie's attitude when she came back, and she couldn't do enough for us. She wanted to make sure that she was available to cover hours when other people wanted to be on holiday. She wanted to take on extra workload if other people were struggling, etc. And it really did show that it was of benefit to all parties to be there, to understand and to give people what they needed.
If I hadn't got the support from Jo and the rest of my colleagues, I really think that I would have been signed off with anxiety. It was a really anxious time for me and my family. It was really necessary for people to understand, but I did get that understanding from them, so I'm really grateful. Working at in-house, it's really like having another family, an extension of your family.
I think Merit is different to a number of companies in that we really do try to look after the whole person. It isn't just about the finances and what they do in the 8 or whatever hours they're in the hotel. I think it's very important that we look after everything, because if we are important to them and we invest in them, we get much more back from them. They invest in us, we have much greater engagement. They feel very much part of a family. And as we are still a family-run business, we want to have that sense of belonging, that sense that you're important and that everything about you is important. We don't just care about the third of your day, the 8 hours that you're here, we care about all of you. One of the things that we found very valuable is we have an associate helpline. And fairly recently, my director of sales came to me and she was going through a very tough time. And we had a conversation about what she was going through. And I suggested she called the helpline because really she was looking for legal advice that I didn't think was within my realm of expertise.
One of the things I was most worried about was actually starting a new job, whilst my personal world was caving in. So the first step that the Marriott gave me was to give me some time out of the business. And there was no restraints on that time. It was take as long as you need and do that now. The fact that Marriott actually did support me meant that I took a short time out of the business. I was given flexibility. I continued to work. There was no need for me to take any sick leave or any time out because they knew what was going on. I was in communication with them all the time. Because of that kind of support mechanism, if you like, they got an employee that was in the business rather than, 3 months sick, no communication or scared to approach the employer, because it was that working kind of partnership. We were both able to get as much out of it.
You can have one of your star performers and they will go through a tough time. It doesn't make them any less valuable, because they will come out of that if you support them and if you look after them, and they will deliver even more for you later on because they know that you have treated them as a human being and not just a number.
I'm very grateful to Marriott for everything, really. Everybody will go through something in their lives when they need some time from their employer. And for me, I think it goes beyond thank you, because it's been a company that have actually been there in many ways.
With some more CVs, but she hasn't actually said anybody in particular. So I
Hi Chris, it's Karina. Is Helen available at all? When I was 37, I just became so unhappy with everything. And I remember thinking at the time that this isn't normal to sit here and work and just cry all day. And in the end, I just decided that I needed to see my GP because I really didn't know what was going on. And although I felt at the lowest point ever in my life, and that was made clear to me because the doctor asked me a question, he said, did I want to kill myself? And my response to that was, no, I just wish I was dead. And then in January, I went into meltdown again. Went to see my line manager, who very helpfully, actually, after I managed to stop crying, was able to start speaking, was able to say, I don't really understand how you're feeling, but what do you need me to do? That was refreshing.
It's about supporting and acknowledging that sometimes, people will be unwell and need to be at home and need to seek professional advice for their support, but it's about how you support that person. And I understand from Karina that she's felt much happier in her role with that support, and actually she's been able to be at work through some difficult periods in her life.
for me, the way to get the support I needed was first to talk to my line manager in an open and honest way, to give her advice, so that, because there's obviously times when I'm really well, and then there's other times when maybe I'm not as well as I could be. And that is the time when I need to know that I can go to her and say, I need some support here. And we have that kind of relationship, so that's really helpful.
I'm particularly proud of what Karina's achieved here at NHS Swindon, and actually she has taken time to look after her own health and well-being, whereas I think previously she'd perhaps taken time out using the flexible working option, but not time out for herself. She tried to balance work and personal, health and well-being together, and what we've done is actually separated that out. So if Karina's unwell, then she takes time out and she comes back to work much more quickly than she would have done without that support.
I realise I'm actually not going to be here on the 14th of September, so is there anything that
I think it's sometimes disappointingly difficult for larger companies because perhaps sometimes there's too much structure in there, and they sometimes perhaps forget that there's a human being here that, like with Debbie, she's worked for her for 7 years, so after 6 years she came to me with a problem. I knew immediately she wasn't taking advantage. I knew immediately this was big stuff and important to her, so I didn't have to sit there for a second and question what I needed to do. She may have handed in her notice and left at the time, and we'd have lost a vital employee. So I think it can be amazingly short-sighted to just close your eyes and hope the person's problem will go away, because it won't.
Looking after your people is just the most simple and easy way to make your business work well. And if we look after the people and allow their personalities to come through and allow them to shine, then that gives us an edge. To me, it's a no-brainer. Every single person out there who runs a business, no matter what they do, should be putting their people at the heart of what they do. Because if you look after them, they will look after your business.